Hello, everybody. It's week 10. Welcome back. Here we go. We are opening our new unit, which is the informational report. Now you're going to say to yourself, oh my gosh, informational report? What is all this about? Well, it's about all this. You've been doing a lot of the heavy lifting already. You've started your research. You've started annotating. You've been evaluating sources. You've been thinking about your research questions, and you've been citing your sources as well. So all of this is coming into focus, right? We are going to take this and go to the next level. So we're going to start by, in our overview, please take a look at what we're doing this week. I've made a little modification since I last sent out our announcements. I know you've got a lot going on. I know that this is week 10. I know this is election week. I know that this is a, tough time. Traditionally, week 10 is a time when people gotta go, oh, how much more is there? Well, heads up, there's 5 more weeks. And then they say, oh my God, there's only 5 weeks? I gotta get my stuff together. So 2 things are happening at the same time. So to deal with those conflicting feelings of, oh my God, there's not enough time, and oh my God, there's so much time, let's just pace ourselves. So I dropped the journal assignment. We're going to look at other point redemption opportunities for those who need it, but in this moment, let's just drop that and move on. You do have your They Say, I Say assignment for your source that you found from the library. It can be a scholarly source. It can be something from the databases in general. It can be a lot of things, but it must come from the library, just to show me that you can navigate those databases and find something relevant and useful. I want to remind you that the prompt is longer than it looks. The instructions for how to do the last bit about the paragraphs, how to use different kinds of signal phrases to introduce source material, that's at the very bottom. So please make sure you've read that so that you know what's being asked of you. And that's kind of a heads up in general. I've noticed a couple of times people have missed things in the prompts. And I can understand that some of them were not as clear as they could have been, which is a good lesson for me, right? You're giving me feedback about what works and what doesn't. I can make edits and changes for future classes. Thank you. But I'm referring to the journal assignment that had 2 different documents, one for plagiarism checking and one for the MLA. If you missed the MLA one because it was buried, I will let you redo that, just heads up, because that was my lack of clarity that I want to own and honor and say that I will work with you in that. But some other prompts are more straightforward, and some people just didn't read them. So I want you to be really aware that every prompt has to be, you have to analyze the prompt, read it closely, maybe annotate it for yourselves so that you know what's being asked of you. I don't ding you heavily. I'm a pretty generous grader, but I do want you to kind of up the game, because as we're getting into the informational report, we're honing our academic skills. We're writing like grown-ups now. We're writing for an academic audience with an academic voice using academic tools. So these are skills that you're going to be using in future classes, whether you use MLA or not. You might be using APA or Chicago or some other citation style. You will still be using an academic tone of voice. You're going to be using ethical research and citation skills. You're going to avoid plagiarism. All of those things are going to come into play. So keep that in mind. So you're going to do your They Say, I Say. We've got some reading to go on to manage. I've included a handout. This information is also in the OER, but since I hadn't assigned the actual chapter about paragraph development, I've got this handout for you. I've got some PowerPoints about structuring the informative report. The PowerPoint is kind of long, so you can do the first chunk of it this week and then just do more chunks as we go. We're just going to repost that PowerPoint because it's kind of the everything you ever needed to know about writing an informational report in one place, which isn't to say you shouldn't read your OER. You should. Your support assignment will be a scavenger hunt. Once you've understood the structure of a report, you're going to look at a student report and you're going to do a scavenger hunt. You're going to look for elements of the report in that scavenger hunt, in that essay. So that will make sense in a little bit. And you've got the assignment itself for the informational report and a presentation about planning and conducting a personal interview, because that's another way of gathering information that we will be relying on. You're going to take a quiz on subject-verb agreement, and if you are scheduled to do so, you'll post your parallelism presentation. So a reminder of the they say, I say. The prompt is here. I want you to look at it really closely. Make sure that you've answered and addressed every part of that prompt. These are the 4 parts, but the 4th part really asks you to look at some detailed stuff. So that's going to be due by Sunday. Yeah, I'm not turning anything in, you're right. Here it is some information about for your quiz. This is the handout about paragraph development. Let's just take a look at that real quick. There are 2 acronyms that educators use when they talk about paragraphs. One is TEAR and the other is PI. TEAR stands for topic, sentence, evidence, analysis, and reflection, or conclusion and transition. So it's kind of a wrap up of the paragraph, and you move on. Now, so something we talked about when we discussed our narratives is that every paragraph has to have a point, right? It has to have a focus. If you change topics, you change paragraphs. Well, that was a junior lesson in paragraph development. In this more sophisticated lesson in paragraph development, you think about, what is the paragraph really about? What is your topic of your paragraph? That's like a thesis or the statement, hello, my paragraph is about this, that lets the reader know what's up. Then we have evidence, which it can be a quote from your source. It can be a paraphrase from your source. It can be a summary from your source. It can be an observation that you've made. It can be a quote or a paraphrase from an interview. It can be more than one, but it has to be presented, right? Topic, sentence, and then the evidence. But the evidence just doesn't sit there. You have to introduce it. So-and-so, author of such and such, says this thing about this thing, which is cool. Or you can cite it parenthetically, which we're going to be learning about soon, but you have to tell the reader where the information comes from. It can be a quote, as I say, direct quote, where you use the exact wording from the source, or it can be a paraphrase where you put the idea into your own words, but you still credit the source. Analysis is the next move. You don't just drop a quote in, boom. It's like, well, why is this here? You have to make sense of that. You have to say how this relates to your topic of the paragraph. So why is this quote important? Why is this paraphrase important? What does this demonstrate? What does this prove? What does this illustrate? You explain it for your reader. And then you wrap up your paragraph with a reflection, conclusion, and a transition to the next paragraph. So you're kind of thinking about, how am I moving to my next topic? So that's how you think about TEAR. I'm going to come back to the snarky little brother in a minute. In a PI paragraph, it's the same thing. It's just a different acronym. The point is the P. What is the point of your paragraph? What's your point, right? You ask yourself, what's my point? That's your topic sentence. I is for illustration. You can illustrate your point with your evidence. So I illustrate my point with an observation. By that I mean, if you're observing, say you're going to observe how donuts are made in a donut factory, and you go in and you watch the process and you report back, that's your evidence as an observation. You're not making stuff up, you're actually seeing and reporting. But most of the time, when you illustrate your point, you do so with evidence from a text or an interview. You introduce it, present it, and comment upon it, and then the explication or explanation is how you explain the evidence as it supports your point. And you can check your work by saying, does the explanation of my illustration explain and support my point? You can work it backwards when you check your work. Does that make sense? So my point is, donuts are made every day at such and such factory, meeting certain standards of safety. How do I illustrate my point? I observe how donuts are made and the safety steps along the way. And maybe I have a quote from so-and-so, manager says, these are safe steps. I explain how this is important. This is important because you don't want to eat poisoned donuts. I'm making stuff up right now. And these safety steps protect the consumer. Okay, check your work. These safety steps protect the consumer. Oh yeah, what are the safety steps? Well, they are these things we observed. And this is what the manager had to say about that. What is that about? Well, that's about the safety of making donuts in this particular manner in the factory. Everything's going to relate. Does that make sense? Now you can think about these things, and there's some examples in this particular handout that shows you how evidence and analysis might work in a paragraph. But another way you can think about it is think about your snarky little brother. I have a snarky little brother. I don't know if you do. My snarky little brother says, "What's all this about?" Well, that's your topic sentence. You have to answer that. What's all this about? Well, this is my topic of my paragraph. Well, yeah, how do you know? You got to prove it. I got to have my evidence. It has to be credible evidence. How do I know it's credible evidence? Well, I think I might have put it through a CRAP test. I've verified that this is good evidence, but I'm going to cite it and tell people where it came from. Well, why should I care? Right? Why should I care? Says my snarky little brother. Well, this is important because, and you explain how the evidence supports your point. And what does that have to do with anything? Well, as a matter of fact, as it relates to blah, 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 and you move to the next paragraph. I am saying this in the doofiest way possible, but you're going to read some sample essays this week that might explain this in a better and clearer way so that you can understand how you are using evidence to support a point which fits into the larger picture of your essay. So, moving forward. Let me get back here. All right. So your support assignment this week is you're going to read you're going to read a sample essay by Susie Suncat. She writes an essay about the benefits of listening to music. And then you're going to use this scavenger hunt to find information about the structure of a report. So please read this prompt carefully. It's going to ask you to find specific things. Among them, what's a topic sentence? Give us an example of a signal phrase. Now you've been practicing signal phrasing in your they say, I say. Find an example of an in-text citation. Find an example of a works cited page as it relates to an in-text citation. Now what is all that about? You're going to figure this out because here we have the overview of the assignment itself. Please read the prompt. Here is the PowerPoint that explains the structure of a report. I'm going to look at some of this with you in another video in a minute. This is an outline. This could be your best friend in some ways because it will walk you through various steps in making an informational report. Your anchoring question. After researching my chosen learning or community issue, what do I want others to understand about it? So now you are in service of your readers, right? You have done the heavy lifting of finding information. You've done the heavy lifting of evaluating information for its credibility, its authority, its currency, its relevance to your question, and its purpose. You've done all this heavy lifting, and now you are going to say, reader, let me tell you what I found, right? Of course, you're taking a neutral stance. Your voice is going to be professional, so that means you're going to use the third person voice. That is not I, but here's the information. You are no longer the subject of your writing. You are the lens. You are you have a voice. You have things to say, but it's not about you. It is about your reader and what they need to know. So it's a shift in your rhetorical situation. So let's take a look at that prompt in the next video. Here you have another sample student informational report. I'd like you to take a look at this as well, just for your own reference.